mankind will be reborn, they theorized, and live in an ordered relation to the whole. These developments were sometimes linked to the word progress. The usage was ironic. Progress, unguided by the humanist, is not progress. Rather than think to shape human nature, the Enlightenment hope for progress was concreted of human institutions, human-made systems like governments, laws, schools, markets, and international bodies as a natural target for the application of reason to human betterment. In this way of thinking, government is not a divine fiat to reign, a synonym for society, or an avatar of the national, religious, or racial soul. It is a human invention, tacitly agreed to in a social contract designed to enhance the welfare of citizens by coordinating their behavior and discouraging selfish acts that may be tempting to every individual, but leave everyone worse off. The most famous product of the Enlightenment, the Declaration of Independence, but it, in order to secure the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, governments are instituted among people, deriving they are just powers from the consent of the governed. Amongst the power of government is meeting our punishment, and the writers such as Montesquieu, Cesare Beccaria, and the American founders drew afresh about the government's license to harm its citizens. Criminal punishment, they argued, is not a mandate to implement cosmic justice, but part of an incentive structure that discourages antisocial acts without causing more suffering than it debtors. The reason the punishment should defeat the crime, for example, is not to balance some mystical scale of justice, but to ensure that a wrongdoer stop at a minor crime rather than escalating to a more harmful one. Cruel punishments, whatever or not they are in some sense deserved, are no more effective and deterring harm than modern but surer punishment that they desensitize spectators and brutalize the society that implements them. The Enlightenment also saw the first rational analysis of prosperity. Its starting point was not how wealth is distributed, but the prior question of how wealth comes to exist in the first place. Smith, building on a French, Dutch, and Scottish influences, noted that an abundance of useful stuff cannot be conjured into existence by a farmer or a craftsman working in isolation. It depends on a network of specialists, each of whom learns how to make something as efficiently as possible and who exchange the fruits of their ingenuity, skill, and labor. In a famous example, Smith calculated that the pin maker working alone could make at most one pin a day, whereas in a workshop in which one man draws out the wire, another straights it, a third cuts it, a fourth points it, a fifth grinds it, and the top for receiving the head, each could make almost 5,000. Specialization works only in a market that allows the specialists to exchange their goods and services, and Smith explained that economic activity was a form of mutually beneficial cooperation, a positive sum game in today's lingo. Each gets back something that is more valuable to him than what he gives up. Throughout voluntary exchange, people benefit others by benefiting themselves, as he wrote. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love. Smith was not saying that people are rude of their self-love, or that they ought to be. He was one of his story's kindest commentator of human sympathy. He only said that in a market, whatever tendency people have to care for their families and themselves and can work to the good of all. Exchange can make an entire society not just richer but nicer, because in an effective market it is cheaper to buy things than to steal them, and other people are more valuable to you alive than dead. As the economist Ludwig von Mises put it centuries later, if the tailor goes to war against the baker, he must henceforth bake his own bread. Many Enlightenment thinkers, including Montesquieu, Kant, Voltaire, Diderot, and the Abbé de Saint-Pierre, endorsed the ideal of doux commerce, gentle commerce. The American founders George Washington, James Madison, especially Alexander Hamilton, designed the institution of the young nation to nurture it. This brings us to another Enlightenment ideal, peace. War was so common in history that it was natural to see it as a permanent part of the human condition, and to think peace could come only in a messianic age. But now war was no longer thought of as a divine punishment to be endured and deplored, or a glorious contest to be won and celebrated, but a practical problem to be mitigated and someday solved. in Perpetual Peace, Kant laid out measures that would discourage leaders from dragging their countries into war. Together with international commerce, he recommended representative republics that we would call democracies, mutual transparency, north against conquest and internal interference, freedom of travel, internal interference, freedom of travel and immigration, and a federation of states that would adjudicate disputes between them. For all the prescience of the founders, frames, and philosophers, this is not a book of umanitatii. The Enlightenment thinkers were men and women of their age, the 18th centuries. Some were racist, sexist, and anti-Semites, slaveholders or dualists. Some of the questions they worried about are almost incomprehensible to us, and they came up with plenty of daffy ideas together with the brilliant ones. More to the point, they were born too soon to appreciate some of the keystone of our modern understanding of reality. They, of all people, would have been the first to concede this. If you extol reason, then what matters is the integrity of the thoughts, not the personalities of the thinkers. And if you're committed to progress, you can very well claim to have it all figured out. It takes nothing away from the Enlightenment thinkers to identify some critical ideas about the human condition and the nature of progress that we know and they didn't. Those ideas, I suggest, are entropy, evolution, and information. Chapter 2. Entro, Evo, Info. Okay. The first keystone in understanding the human condition in the concept of entropy of disorder, which emerged from the 19th century physics and was defined in its current form by the physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. The second law of the thermodynamics states that in an isolated system, one that is not interacting with its environment, entropy never decreases. The first law is that energy is conserved. The third, that a temperature of absolute zero is unreachable. Closed systems inexorably become less structured, less organized, less able to accomplish interesting and useful outcomes until they slide into an equilibrium of gray, tepid, homogeneous monotony and stay there. It is original formulation. The second law referred to the process in which usable energy in the form of a different temperature between two bodies is inevitably dissipated as heat flows from the warmer to the cooler body. As the musical theme Flanders and Swan explain, you can pass heat from the cooler to the hotter. Try it if you like, but you but you far better noter. A cup of coffee, unless it is placed on a plug-in hot plate, will cool down. When the coal feeding a steam engine is used up, the cooled off steam on one side of the piston can no longer budge it because the warmer up steam and air on the other side are pushing back just as hard.